today.
Yeah.
I'm down. I just told Jen I want the kids to watch a little bit, specifically Helen. So yeah.
Very cool. I think it's trying to go live here. Hey, it says Brendan's live. That's a good sign.
That's a good sign.
I don't see it live on my LinkedIn yet, but I'm sure we'll catch up. So yeah, day after Easter, we're live. Happy Q2, everybody. Hope everybody had a great Easter weekend. And we have this evening, we've got the rematch, right? The rematch. Big game. I'm excited for the game tonight.
I'm really excited. They're both going to be really good games. The UConn USC game is going to be great too.
Yeah. My wife's like, I can't believe how much you are a fan of Caitlin. I'm like, she's amazing to me.
She's awesome. I've paid more attention to women's college basketball this year than men's. And it's
same.
Yeah.
Everybody did. It's like, it's not close across the board. That's what's wild.
She does things that I don't care, male or female, it doesn't matter. She just does things that are crazy.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't come here to talk about basketball, although I could do that all day.
I know. So I really could do it all day long, especially this game.
Right. But we have a topic that's equally as enthralling for the audience.
I think so.
Yeah. I hope so. I hope so. And since they signed up to talk about, the latest and greatest on credit triggers and all the great things that are going on with the Broker Action Coalition, we probably should get onto that subject. So Brendan, Katie, welcome to my live podcast here. This is session 3 of a 3-part series on credit triggers. 3 weeks ago, actually, we had the Mortgage Bankers Association came on the day before they kicked off their advocacy conference, which went really well, I'm told. And then last week I had Taylor from CHLA, who was at the NAC event. So he kind of gave a summation of that. And then in true Taylor way, he gave his own opinion on all things credit triggers. And we are now in April. We've got the big event coming up for the Broker Action Coalition back in DC, and we're going to talk about that. And so what a great way to kind of wrap up my 3-part series and to have my great friends, Katie Sweeney and Brendan McKay on. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, thank you for having us, man.
So the engagement on the first 2 sessions is pretty good. We had a lot of people kind of piped in and asked questions as we went. So I do encourage those of you that are watching from LinkedIn or Facebook. I know Brendan shared it out to a group on Facebook. So if you're watching and you have a question, pop those into the comments. I'll do my best to monitor that. But I want to cover a lot of ground here. Let's start with the Broker Action Coalition, right? It's I think the newest advocacy group in our industry, and you two have done an amazing job getting that thing where it's at today. So let's start there, Katie. Just kind of, if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about how this came about, and then I'd love to hear directly. I've been watching with amazement what you guys have been doing, but I would love to hear from both of you on kind of what your new day jobs look like.
Yeah. Well, on our side, Brendan and I started working together, almost 3 years ago now, pretty close to 3 years ago. And when Brendan joined the team, we had a conversation about how advocacy was important, but it was something that brokers hadn't necessarily shown a huge interest in getting involved in. So it's one thing to say you want to be involved in advocacy, and it's another thing to actually participate and take action and sign letters and donate money. And so we spent about a year trying to figure out what the temperature looked like in the market. It was also 2021. So people were crazy busy and still in that massive cycle of business where loans were falling from the sky. I mean, I remember Brendan telling stories of not leaving his basement for 18 hours at a time, just so much business. And we didn't want to create something that was a distraction, but also wanted to make sure that we were keeping a pulse on what people were looking for and what kind of support was necessary for the channel. And as our previous association continued to grow and expand, we started to see more and more conversations that on the surface might not have looked like advocacy, but underneath, when you really pulled the layers back, it was, well, this is a problem that needs to be fixed by legislators, or this is a regulatory issue, or this is something that has to be done at the state level. And we realized very quickly, not only did we not have the infrastructure to be able to support that at scale, nobody did. The broker channel specifically in wholesale business, and even stretching into all third-party originators, have been severely underrepresented, not just in DC, but in any industry conversation for well over a decade, probably closer to 15 to 20 years. And in that window of time, TPO business and wholesale business got so small that it wasn't really a necessary component, or it wasn't perceived to be a necessary component of what's going on in the industry and how do we manage it, because it was such a small segment of the market. And that shifted very quickly, especially over the last 5 to 7 years. Now we're talking about 1 in every 3 loans is originated by a third-party originator. 1 in every 4 is a mortgage broker. And so in the middle of 2022, we decided, let's, put our money where our mouth is, for lack of a better term, and let's launch a PAC and let's see what happens. And when we did, it was one of the fastest and most well-funded PACs to grow in the mortgage industry ever, from what we were told. We raised over $360,000 in less than 48 hours. And over 80% of that came from mortgage brokers. These weren't big corporate donors, weren't getting, and the way that our PAC is set up, we can't take big corporate donations anyway, we're maxed out. And so the beginning of 2023, Brendan and I sat down and said, okay, 100% of your time for Brendan needs to be advocacy, and I'm still going to keep splitting my time with the association. But by the end of last year, there was such a need, and this is growing so quickly, that we both decided we both have to go all in and really commit to spending time in DC, building these relationships with legislators, getting to know other associations and what they're doing, and figuring out how we can make sure that we're never left out of the conversation again. We've done a lot in that short window of time, but we know that we can do so much more if we have consistent focus in just this one area, as opposed to being spread across a variety of topics and things that come along with association management.
And that, like, your question, like, how's, your new job, like, it's changed for me the least. I'm still originating full-time. I'm still focused on advocacy full-time. It's the same work that we've been doing, just a new flag. And we took the ceiling off of it. So that there's really nothing else distracting us from where our efforts are going. And it's gone incredibly well so far. The announcement was extremely well received. We have a lot of work left to be done, but a lot of the organizational aspects of it came together really quickly, including the launch of our board of directors. We had our first meeting the other week. We're going to have an in-person one at Advocacy in Action later on this month. And we're, to Katie's point, like we're going to talk about the very top issue on our legislative agenda right now, trigger leads. But what's the umbrella over all of that is getting getting mortgage brokers a seat at the table in a way that they've never really had before, including, there was a lot of advocacy that happened pre-2008, but they were 70% of the market, and they still got left out in the cold when it came to all the regulatory changes and the conversations that were happening. And that just can't happen again. We're doing 1 out of 4 mortgages. We should be involved in these kinds of conversations, and now we are. So it's great.
And I definitely want to get into the credit triggers, but one of the challenges that any association has is participation, right? Really getting the participation of the members and the folks that we're serving, that we're trying to serve, right? It's any association that's out there. And this broker community is very active. I see it very active on the social channels.
Yeah.
And I'm more curious than anything because of the timing of, BAC coming into existence, when the social channels are such a, widely used and well-received medium. Do you think that where social is today? Do you think that's helpful in the growth of this group?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you go back to what really sort of galvanized and brought brokers together AIM and Brawl and that whole movement was really kind of the first big thing in recent history that brought brokers, and it grew from a Facebook group. I mean, at our core, mortgage brokers, they spend time where their agents spend time. They spend time where their clients spend time, and that's on social media. Even LinkedIn is starting to grow now, which is great in the broker side. It's been very largely dominated by retail lenders and the retail side of the industry and mortgage servicers for a very long time, because LinkedIn has a perception of being a little bit more corporate, and maybe you're not going to find a buyer on LinkedIn. But we're even starting to see brokers shift over to this platform and Medium as well, which I think is fantastic. I mean, they've completely dominated Facebook over the last 7 years, and I think that's only going to continue to grow. And we're starting to see more branch out into Instagram, but more specifically TikTok, right? I mean, that any platform where there are potential consumers or potential home buyers consuming information is somewhere that a mortgage broker needs to be present. And so we really have, Brendan and I both in the back have really leaned in on how do we utilize social, but also how do we help originators utilize social, right? So many of the topics that matter to us also matter to agents or also matter to homeowners or potential home buyers in the future. And if we know they're on social platforms, then we need to create content that's shareable in a way that everyone understands, even if they're not an originator, and try to drive as much activity as possible. And in just about 90 days since we sort of officially launched the back, less than 90 days, we have almost 15,000 people in our database already from 3 months worth of work that didn't exist previously. And we've got a lot of potential going forward to be able to use that as a growth multiplier and leveraging Facebook in a way that a lot of other associations aren't. And I think that's a differentiator in the broker channel, is that finding a way to communicate with originators when you really need a grassroots movement, you need to know where they're at and you need to be able to speak to them in large quantities. And you can do that with mortgage brokers on social media.
Yeah. And like to use the MBA in as example and why it's different, right? Like brokers are small companies. They're 1 to 5 person companies on average, and they're all over the place. And like before AIM, Brawl, all that stuff, everyone kind of existed in their own silos. And that's true from 2007, 2008. It was probably much more difficult to get these people's attention with newsletters and stuff like that, right? Yeah. But now with social media, and not just the value, hopefully, of the information that we're providing all these brokers, but just the fact that they can connect in with the rest of their peers and talk about things like best practice, refer business to each other. There's so much value already with them being connected to each other on Facebook and other social media platforms, and with that audience already created there, it's much easier to communicate these kinds of issues to them than it might be just with a newsletter and a conference once a year, so we're leaning into it as much as possible.
Yeah, I think I just, again, watching the what's gone on in the broker channel specifically and how social has been leveraged in that channel in particular. I've seen and watched other sides of the business kind of say, oh, wait a minute, what's going on over here? There's something's happening here, and it's not all bad, by the way. There's some cool things happening. And so what I'm encouraged by is just, our industry is pretty small, and then it gets even smaller when you start to look at the channels.
Yeah.
But, for me, I've always been kind of a cross-channel collaborator type a person, and I think these shared the shared attention on this one particular topic that we're going to get into next, it seems to be somewhat galvanizing the industry as a whole, and I'm really excited to kind of dig in here again. Part 3 of our 3-part series. I think in the first 2 sessions we did a pretty good job of defining what the issue is and what's going on. What I really want to do is really focus in on, the legislative work that you guys are doing literally every day, hours during the day to kind of move this thing forward. So I don't know who wants to start, but it would be really interesting just to kind of have like a day in the life, if you will, as it relates to how you guys are interfacing with our legislators.
Yeah, well, I'll kick it off and then I'll toss it over to you, Brendan. So it was, let's see, February of last year when our very good friend Enrique asked a very challenging question in front of an audience and said, what are you guys going to do about credit triggers? And at the time, Brendan and I had discussed before and said, okay, what is the likelihood that we're actually going to get something done? And a year ago, I think most people would have said slim to none. This is not the first congressional session that a bill attempting to ban or modify credit triggers has been introduced. This is the third in a row, actually. And so when you look at historically where it came from, the lack of movement, the lack of engagement from legislators, we knew from the very beginning we were going to have to take a different approach, or we were just going to be another sort of riding the bike but not going anywhere type of a situation. And so when we decided to hit the hill, one of the first things that we did was try to understand, what do you know and what do you not know about credit triggers, and how do we make this personal? One of our goals in everything that we do is not just communicating to legislators in a way that they're used to hearing, but how do we make this personal for them and for their constituents? How do we draw examples from people who live in their districts? How do we pull on the people who can vote to reelect them to also participate in this conversation so we're more likely to get attention at a faster pace? So we started creating these one-pagers that have gone over incredibly well. It's super digestible, very simple infographic style information, but you drop one of those in an office after having a meeting, and it seems to push the conversation much further, faster, because we've now taken all of the work away from them. They don't have to research, they don't have to go look things up. We've given personal examples, we've told stories, and we've also offered to connect them with an originator or a consumer from their district to be able to have a one-on-one conversation if they want to learn more about what happened. And so Brendan obviously lives in the DC area. I go to DC about once a month. And for the last 14 months, the number one conversation that we've had when being out there is specific to credit triggers and what we're going to do about trigger leads and what the issues are that exist right now, why regulation currently isn't working, where enforcement is falling short, the way that fines are managed or not managed. We also have a really great advantage in those meetings because I used to work at a lender that bought credit triggers like crazy. That was my first job in mortgage. I ran consumer direct marketing for Pacific Union Financial, which then sold to Mr. Cooper later. But back in 2016 and 17, we were one of the biggest purchasers of credit triggers in the country. Brendan's been an originator for, I'm not going to age you, so you can say how.
I've been in the mortgage industry since 2005. I got licensed in 12, we'll say. I'm not sure. Yeah.
But for quite some time, and for him to be able to speak to examples of customers that he's talking to between our meetings and in the hallway when we're walking through, going from one building to another, and for me to be able to speak to the mentality of lenders and the way that they manage the fines and their just sort of dismissal of that is something that's just the cost of doing business. I think has really provided a different perspective that maybe they're not used to hearing all that often.
I mean, the first thing, even before, like you let it off in the first couple calls, you've just been like talking, you establish what trigger leads are, how they work, all that stuff. Like, and we have to do the exact same thing. I mean, before that, we have to explain what a mortgage broker is.
Sure.
And they don't know what a mortgage broker is. And you know, even the ones that say they do, most of them do not either, because it's just, you know, the vocabulary is so misused. So it's just setting very baseline and explaining it to terms that they'll understand. I think it's the same as anything else. Like when I'm thinking about ways to explain an escrow account to a buyer, I don't talk to them like I'm talking to a peer or a realtor or a title company or another mortgage broker. I explain it I try to find confines that they already understand, you know, or walking it one step at a time. So we've gotten better at the messaging, but the messages remain the same. Just explaining in very simple terms that the credit bureaus are selling consumer data without their permission. And that is the crux of all of this, right? Like we know how awful, a lot of times when people talk about trigger leads, they lead with the end, but it's no, start with the beginning. Like this is the baseline problem that's happening. And it's something that's offensive to literally everybody. Everybody cares so much about data privacy right now. I don't care what you do or what industry, I don't care. You might not even work at all. And you're probably very worried about it. So that's where you start. And that's what we've done. And it's gone over extremely well. Katie, is down in DC at least once a month. We squeeze as many congressional meetings and Senate meetings as we can, usually about 6 or 7 a day in a 2 to 3 day window. We've been focusing on House Financial Services and Senate banking. And initially, depending on exactly what was going on, sometimes we were focusing more on Republicans or sometimes more Democrats. And now we have a ton of both on. So it's just pushing all hands. And then like anything else, you just hope that everybody else is pushing in the same direction and that we're not the only ones having conversations with these offices about it. And that's been the case. And it's gone great. There's a very happy with the position that we're in right now.
I would add on to that too. I think, Brian, going back to one of your first questions, like, how are we doing this? One of the things that was also really important was to evaluate the landscape of everybody else that is interested in modifying or eliminating trigger leads. There are so many other associations and advocacy groups out there that agree. I mean, to Brendan's point, basically every major industry association, every consumer advocacy group, everyone wants to see this legislation move forward, but everyone has a different approach and everybody brings something different to the table. And so we recognize that we're the new kids on the block. We're the newest members of this team that's trying to make the industry better. And so for us, we always want to focus on bringing a perspective that might not be as present in some of the other conversations. There's a lot of great leaders at the MBA and great leaders at CHLA and people who have so much experience in the industry, but the actual people going to the Hill, the lobbyists and those that are speaking with legislators on a regular basis, they're not necessarily industry people. They're not necessarily originators. They don't have personal stories to be able to share about what happened to a consumer that they know. They have the greater statistics and the broader industry impact. And so we focus a lot, and Brendan focuses a lot on sharing what happens personally, what happens to your neighbor, what happens to your son's teacher, what happens to the Little League coach. Those are the people that turn the opinion of a staffer or turn the opinion of a legislator, because those are the people that can vote or not vote to get them reelected. And on the House side, that's the name of the game. Staying in office is half the battle if you want to do good work. It's a little different in the Senate, but I mean, the House side, they're focused on getting, they get a year, 18 months, maybe 2 years off before they're focused on getting reelected again, right? So if our story is tying back to constantly what is the ultimate thing of value for that legislator, and the ultimate thing of value is reelection, that we always have to talk about how this impacts their ability to get reelected and how it impacts the people that they're going to have to go home and talk to if this legislation doesn't move forward.
I'm curious if in your conversations, if anybody, maybe not the representative themselves, but somebody in their office has kind of said, "Oh my gosh, that's what that's about."
Yes.
That's got to be. I would almost be going in with Brendan's link to apply and saying, "Let's do a little test right here."
Well, we're hoping it doesn't get to that. But yeah,
no. Me as an example, I bought a house last year, and so we've got all of my personal stuff and what happened when I bought a home, but we have not yet signed up a legislator for a trigger league directly.
That would be interesting.
It would be, but no, it's like a good amount of the time. It's I'll start with, do you know what a trigger lead is? And every once in a while they'll say yes, and some most of the time they say no, and then I start explaining. They're like, "Yep, okay, I know what you're talking about." Like, because they might have bought a house a year or two ago, and like they didn't know the name for it, but they'll never forget how awful the experience is, for sure.
Yeah, what I think is super cool, among a bunch of other stuff that's going on in the industry, is we talked about what the NBA did with their annual event just a few weeks back, and now literally like 4 weeks later, another group of industry experts in this group, to Katie's point, consisting of largely of owner operators and owner operators who actually originate every day with consumers, is going to be hitting the Hill, hitting some of the same offices. And so I'm going to be interested to kind of see and hear them be like, "Oh yeah, we just talked to somebody, a few weeks back." And so just, it's not one group really that's going to address this. It's going to be within our industry, multiple groups, and then across industries, other groups that are, have an interest in ultimately protecting the consumer.
No, you're absolutely correct. Like I would love to live in a world where we could bitch and moan about something and it gets done just because we said so, but we we recognize that these offices have, and and as they should, they need to listen to everyone collectively. And the more that they hear the same message from different groups, the better. And then eventually you just hope, there's a straw that breaks the camel's back, and then they take action. So yeah, that's the approach.
Yeah. And we have I think originators and brokers specifically have gotten a bad rap in the past for being like a little bit too hard to wrangle, that everyone's just kind of running in a different direction all the time. And there's no possible way you could get one collective voice to come together and push a message. And to your original point, Brian, the power of social media and our ability to communicate regularly and honestly and transparently with people has also allowed us to create an environment where we do have the grassroots side, right? There are so many associations that have the experience and the corporate structure and the governance, and all of those things are incredible. And that's what we're building towards. And that's what we want to be able to emulate. But I think sometimes you get so big that you lose touch with the people or a segment of people that you represent. And we have the advantage of still being new and being small and being nimble and being able to have direct conversations with, like you said, owner operators that have stories to tell, that care about not only their business, but the people that they serve. I mean, our advocates they're as local as they get, right? I mean, not only are they 1 to 5 people, they're often only licensed in 1 to 3 states. And so you're talking about folks that are ingrained in their community, that have experiences and stories to share. And we get to help be the conduit for them to do that. And that's building stages for people to be able to do good work. That's all we really ever wanted to be focused on.
And we found that you can build that collective voice. I think you need to communicate to the group differently than others might, but our community is incredibly engaged, which can make things harder for us. But at the same time, as long as you're being real with them, and giving it to them straight and constantly communicating with them, I think it's very possible. And the trigger lead issue is one of the first big tests of that, where when we can go through the kind of the legislative history, but to skip it over, even this most recent Congress, the bill that was introduced initially did not have any of these exceptions for mortgage servicers, original originator, depository banks, et cetera, et cetera. And Katie and I, and when it got put out there was a lot of excitement within the community, and everyone's and we're sitting here and we're like, this is the definition of insanity, right? It's the exact same bill that's been introduced multiple times before. There have been no co-sponsors, no movement,
right?
Whatsoever. So do we go do this song and dance to appease our members that really care about this issue and are probably paying attention to it much more than they had been previously? And they're like, holy shit, a bill just got introduced. Let's go, or do we treat them like adults and be like, hey, here's the deal. We're going to talk to this office, but this bill has no chance whatsoever. It will receive no industry support whatsoever. And we're not here just to placate you. We're here to get things done. And if we tell this office we're supporting the bill, they're going to be less likely to make the changes to it that we think are necessary. So we put a letter out to the community explaining that. We're applauding the fact that it was introduced, but we're here to solve problems, not to cheerlead.
Right.
And it was incredibly well received. I was so nervous putting that out there because it was by far the number one issue. And we know it, not just because of chatter, but when people donate to the back, they list what do you want this money going towards? Basically, what legislative issues do you care about? Trigger leads was always number one, and the number two, had a lot of votes, but it wasn't that close. And so we put ourselves out there with that, and the community, they got it. They're like, okay, and there was very, very little, if any, pushback to the stance that we took on it. But then when the bill that in the form it is right now was launched, we were like, let's go. This is the one. Here we go. So yeah, they can be harder to communicate with, but not impossible. You just have to go about it the right way.
Well, again, I think going back to our initial kind of conversation around the platform, they're already active there anyway. And so I think just the fact that that's going on, I'm curious on what so I think one of the coolest tools that's available for everybody is their ability to communicate directly with their representative, right? Through through the BAC website, you can kind of, because I went and did it and sent my
Good job.
letters off. I got a return. I actually got a response from one of the representatives. It was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to track kind of how that utilization's going so far?
Yeah, so we switched over to a new platform in January, but we can. And part of the reason we switched to this new one is it's got more analytics than what we were able to find from our previous platform. Like I said, we're still new to the game, but we feel pretty good about what we've got right now. We're able to track unique individuals. So that's that almost 15,000 number that have engaged since the beginning of the year. But we can also look at total letters sent. In 2023, I think the number was over 60,000 letters were sent from people that participated in different calls to action with us. And we can do hyper local just by state specific. We can do federal issues. So it's really going to be something that we lean on to be able to scale and to be able to do more with less resources. But it's super simple. Like you said, I mean, it takes 15 to 20 seconds. And once you've done one, it's even faster the next time because the platform remembers you. And so you don't have to enter your information in again. It just goes directly to the relevant legislators. We restrict on our side if it's Senate or House or who is your elected official that should be receiving this message. A lot of them, we even leave the letters editable. So if you want to make it personal or you want to add your own story, you can do that to the template that's already there, or you can just hit send and send it out as is. But Brian, your experience is not dissimilar to most. I mean, we hear all the time from people that are like, holy cow, I didn't think I was going to get an answer. Like, not only did I get an answer, they requested a conversation. We've had so many advocates of ours that have been able to have phone calls with their local offices, that have gone into the district office at home, that have met with their elected official just from sending what people classify as a form letter, but it's not. And our lobbyists beat this into our heads at the very beginning so much, and it's so true. Their job is to serve their constituents. They want to hear from you. They want to hear what's going on. They want to know what those issues are, because they know if they can solve problems on your behalf, you're more likely to keep them in office, right? It always goes back to, how do I get reelected and how do I keep this job? And same thing for any of us. We all have jobs that we have. We all have things that we need to do and maintain on a weekly or a monthly cadence to make sure that we get to keep our job. Elected officials are the same way. And a big component of that is direct feedback from those that have the power to allow them to stay in the job that they love. And they truly do, for the most part, want to help. I think, especially in an election year, that's a really important thing to hit home on, because there's so much commentary in the media, and there's this whole narrative that every side hates each other and they're not willing to work together, and nobody in DC actually wants to do anything. I mean, there's so many frustrations with the lack of movement on certain topics. But at the end of the day, everybody that we've met with truly wants to be helpful to as many people as possible. And the easiest way and the best way for them to do that is to hear from you directly, because it gives them an avenue for a conversation, and that's what they're looking for.
Like our experience, there's certainly plenty of problems in Washington, D.C. I'm not going to pretend they're not, but and not that what people see on cable news might be completely made up, but it's not the entire story, and it's not everything that's happening down there. And it's not our experience in these types of conversations. I think also, like, when you're talking about housing and financial stuff, like, and the people in the committees that we're talking about, like, they're way too boring for cable news, frankly. So, but they're like good, serious people. They're not perfect, but they generally do care. And that has been much more of our experience. There's a lot more collaboration. I know that we probably are still going to have some problems because of the dysfunction of DC in a larger sense. But it's not what what it would look like from the outside looking in, or like, that's not all of it, right? That's some of it. But there's a whole boring 80% over here that doesn't get that kind of attention.
Well, and we're very lucky, right? I mean, the thing that we're championing is housing, right? It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, Libertarian, Independent, like, your political affiliation does not matter. You have a vested interest in housing in some capacity, whether that's getting more people into homes, dealing with housing affordability, figuring out how we create generational wealth through new home buyers, how we expand access to home ownership, how we manage data privacy and data sharing regarding financial services institutions, how we help small businesses grow, how we help veterans utilize all of their benefits. I mean, the list, that the list goes on in ways that you can talk about housing that is going to matter to anybody you're in a meeting with. And as long as you understand what their interests are and how you can tie their interest back to your story or bring stories forward to them that help beat that point home, we get to talk about something that's bipartisan. And not every advocacy group out there is in that same position. There are lots that can only do work if one party is in power versus the other. And that's not the case for us. It doesn't really matter who's in power or who has more authority or what the House environment or the Senate environment or who the president is. Everyone's going to want to keep talking about housing in some capacity. We just have to shift the way that we present the information to whoever it is that we're trying to talk to at that time.
Yep. Like they might care about different parts of it, and we just have to figure that out. So the same way that I'll explain escrows differently to a realtor versus a borrower, we might talk about trigger leads to a Republican office slightly differently than we do to a Democrat office, because, or like depending on what the district they're from. Yep. So it's just about being smart about, crafting your message to be personalized to the person that you're actually speaking to.
Like any smart business meeting you're prepping for, right? Do a little research.
Well, and then follow up, baby. And then follow up, man. I explain to all our brokers, I'm like, you can have the best lunch ever with a new realtor, but if you don't follow up after that, what difference does it make? Yeah. So like, for example, after every congressional meeting that we have, I go into the software. I'm able to just type in that a member of Congress's name, and it pulls up everyone in our database that's in that district. And then I send all of them an email. I let them know, we just met with your member of Congress. This is a conversation that we had. Follow-up matters. Like, take 30 seconds to do this. And if they get a dozen emails following our meeting, when that staffer is bringing the information to the representative, it's like, this all makes sense. Here it is. Plus, we had a dozen constituents reach out about the issue. Yep. That stuff matters. And like, one of our messages we're going to be hammering to everyone at Advocacy in Action is like, you have more agency and you're more empowered with this kind of stuff than you think. People, they do the call to action. It feels like you're sending an email off into the ether. And like, even if you do hear back, you get a form letter, but like, it matters. Like, they track every single email that comes in. You remember, Congress isn't sitting there reading all of them, but a staffer is, and they have a spreadsheet, and they go, okay, we got another one on the trigger lead bill. Okay, anytime we get to X number of emails on a topic, we need to bring it to them. Like, that is how these systems work. And one of there can be some challenges with communicating this kind of stuff to our audience, but one of the big advantages that we have is there's a ton of us. And every broker, even if they're a loan officer working for another brokerage, they still feel like this is their business. And they are good. They are easier to get engaged once you do get their attention, and more likely to do that stuff, where at an organization like the MBA, the administrative assistant for some random executive probably is not going to care, right? Like, getting them engaged in that way is going to be a lot more difficult than a loan officer that is getting tons and tons of phone calls, and getting the annoyed borrowers over this issue. So we do have that advantage, which is great.
I mean, how many loan officers, and Brendan, you're in this every day. How many times do you have one of your borrowers call you and say, "What did you do to me?"
Well, never, because I communicate this issue proactively. But like, I have to, right? Every time I do a hard credit pull, I have an email template that we're going to share with everyone soon, where I say, hey, heads up, I just pulled your credit. Here's what's about to happen. Here's why it's happening, right? You need to focus on that. And then we're going to be sharing it with everybody, because it should be ready this week. We're going to have a call to action landing page. That is, the letter will be from the consumer's perspective, not from a loan officer's perspective.
Love that.
And then, because in my email template right now, I'm like, this is a big issue. I'm actually, actively working on a bill in DC to help stop it. Not everyone can say that though, right? So it's like, you give them, hey, there's actually active legislation on this issue right now in DC. It's not going to stop your phone calls right now, but if you're pissed off enough that you want to say something about it, take 30 seconds, click this link, and let your member of Congress know about it.
Love that.
So yeah, we're going to have that out this week.
Let's close this out. Let's talk about the Advocacy in Action coming up 2 weeks. It's literally 2 weeks away, right?
Yep.
So Katie, give us kind of an overview of what the event looks like, how you guys have organized it, and then I want to close with, those of you that are watching, listening, that can't make it to DC in 2 weeks, we want to tell you how you can help in the interim. So first, let's talk about the event itself.
Yeah, so we're expecting a couple hundred people, and basically, like you said earlier, all originators, largely owner operators. They're all just coming to have conversations, not just about trigger leads, but about a variety of topics that are important to the industry and to our channel specifically. So we've got a day full of roundtables that are going to be breaking down issues with veteran homeownership, with Black homeownership and Hispanic homeownership, what the barriers to entry look like. When we, just backing up for a second, when we define advocacy for the back, we have the legislative component and the area that requires bill writers and votes and all of that kind of stuff. We have a regulatory division that's more focused on agencies and regulators in DC, but then we also have an industry component. And there's a lot that we feel like we can clean up as an industry without requiring a third party to get involved. And so the roundtables are really going to be focused on industry first, but then regulatory and legislative issues second, when we're talking about these consumer groups and the specific segments of consumers that are looking to get into more houses. And then on Wednesday, we're doing a full day of training. And so one of the things that's important to us is making sure that people feel like they are set up for success when they go to the Hill. We want everybody to feel comfortable with the topics that we're talking about, but also have a better understanding of why we craft messages the way that we do, how we present information to the legislators while we're there. We've got a bunch of different topics taking place, some really cool panels. The MBA is going to be on a panel. The executive director of NAREP is going to be on a panel. Some of the executive leaders from the VA are coming to talk about veteran homeownership and what's going on with the VA right now. We've got an underserved markets panel with NAREP, like I said, and the chair of our Black homeownership committee or council, Whitley Cooper. And then we're also doing a segment on the importance of data and how we can leverage data and information to influence decision-making in DC and what kind of information we need to pull forward. We're partnering with CoreLogic on that one. We're really excited. That's gonna be really cool. And then we're taking everybody to the Hill. Thursday is Hill Day. We're setting up meetings with almost everybody's individual legislator. That's the goal. We're trying to do 100 meetings this year. We did 55 last year, so 100 is a lofty goal. Yeah. We'll see if we hit 100. That's going to be a lot to try to manage, but the goal is just to spread the message. Like you said, MBA was just there a couple of weeks ago, so legislators will have had about a month. We'll be there in 2 weeks. So hopefully we can kind of bookend those conversations, and what MBA was able to get started and get the ball rolling on. We're just looking to continue to add fuel to that fire and see what we can push forward. But there's a few different pieces of legislation. We're having a PAC reception that we'll have a few members of Congress at as well. So it should be a great time. The whole thing is built around taking action. Brendan's referenced it a couple of times. We're not here to placate people. We want to be problem solvers. We want to be doers. We want to be people who are busy with a purpose, not just busy for the sake of being busy. We have objectives that we're trying to achieve. We have goals that we want to push forward. We want to see how much we can accomplish in a short window of time and how many resources are truly necessary to do the quality of work that we're looking to do. And so some really cool stuff. And how did I even forget? Kyle Draper is speaking at the event. So
yeah, there you go.
There, and he's going to be talking a lot about social media, but more, how do you get people on social media to care about what you care about? And so for us, the application is, how do we turn everybody who attends the event into our biggest digital advocates? And how do we get them to go spread the message so that then their audiences see what's going on and are willing to participate and want to get engaged? So looking at that, one person tells 10 people, those 10 people tell 10 more, all of a sudden you've got a much wider footprint than if we were just going one-to-one all the way through. So it should be great. We're really excited.
And it's the best time to be in DC, right?
The best time.
Mid-spring.
Mid-April, the cherry blossoms are going to be everywhere. It's going to be beautiful.
It won't be. We did previous years in July, so the temperature will be quite a bit better. Yeah,
it was a little toasty the last couple of years, a little sweaty.
So a couple hundred of our closest friends in the industry kind of hit in DC, but that leaves thousands who can still help, right? There's thousands of you out there who can't make it. We understand that, but you can still help. And so, I don't know, Brendan, why don't you close us out with what's the highest action that somebody can take that can't be in DC in 2 weeks?
Completing the call to action. If you've done it with the More Pack already, the MBA's one, great. Do it with ours too. The same message twice. There's no problem with it. That is really it. Like, those things matter so much more. So I'll drop it in the comments. But completing a call to action to your members of your member of Congress and your 2 senators goes an incredibly long way. We'll be back later this year to ask for money, so we'll leave that out for now. You're welcome to give us money. But yeah, I think that's number one. Would you agree, Katie?
Yeah, it's like you said, the signing the letters. I mean, I'll beat the drum on donations because we always need those, right? We are a complete nonprofit. Brian is actually an advisor on the board for the back, so he'll be getting his first sight into all of the financials come February. We're in a great spot. We're really excited about where we're at and what kind of monetary commitments have been made so far. But, the platform that we use to send letters isn't free. The time in DC and the coordination that it takes to paying our lobbyists and all of the PAC management advisors that we have, there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes to make all of this run smoothly. And so we will always take donations for the back. It's a tax write-off, which is great. We're really well funded on the PAC side right now, but as far as the Broker Action Coalition is concerned, we will always take donations there. But if you can't donate and you can't come to DC, yes, absolutely. Signing letters makes a huge difference. Telling people about the work that we're doing, join the Broker Action Coalition Facebook group. Make sure that if you've signed a letter, you're in our database. So you'll get any of the newsletters or call to actions that we send out in the future that are relevant for you. But join the Facebook group. If nothing else, you're already hanging out on social media, come hang out with us. If you've got issues or topics or things that you want to see people talking about, share them in that group. And kind of like Brendan said, if there's enough activity on a specific topic, we add it to our legislative agenda and try to figure out where it fits in the broader goals for the year, especially with this congressional session ending in December. We have, not even 9 months, because really we have maybe 4 months until the election madness gets going. And then, a month and a half after the election for any final things that need to be wrapped up before the end of the year. But if it's a big enough topic and people really care, we'll add it to the agenda for this year. If it's something that we can start building research around so that we can launch a formal campaign in January when the next congressional session starts, we'll do that too. But we want to hear from you. We want to know what issues you're running into, what state issues are coming up in your area that maybe aren't federal concerns. We have a whole team that's leading all of the state initiatives now, Lindsay McCoy and Rachel Clark and Julian Stewart, who are incredible and have done some amazing work in Texas and Mississippi and California over the last 18 months. They're going to be heading up our state captain program and making sure that the state legislation doesn't get left behind either. So we've got something for everyone. Just join the team.
I think from a individual on the street loan officer perspective, literally being able to say that you are in tune with the legislative issues that impact housing, and that that's part of the value of working with a professional. I mean, that can't be understated either.
Absolutely.
Guys, I appreciate you coming on today. This was I learned a ton. I'm hopeful, and I expect our audience did. I'm looking forward to the time together in DC in a few weeks, and we're going to have to do this a couple more times, I think, throughout the year, just to give folks an update on kind of how we're progressing here. Thank you so much.
Pencil it in. We're there.
Thanks, man.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. I think we're going to take next Monday off. I need a break on these Monday live, but look for something cool coming up in a few weeks. See y'all.